Hello everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I'm working on a custom designed rocket that I call Boldly Go. This is made from a lot of spare parts and broken parts of other rockets, so you could call this a frankenrocket or a junk box rocket. But I really didn't have anything in particular in mind except that I wanted a kind of a long, sleek rocket. And I've also got some 3D printed components. So for example, we've got, see if I can get that in the camera here. All right, so this is a 3D printed nose cone. It's for BT-50. But you can kind of see there that my background keeps trying to kill it there. But it's got a canopy on that, so it looks like a cockpit. And then I'm also using a 3D printed transition here. Again, if we can get it to show as it looks like everything else. Okay, so I'll be using BT-50 and BT-60 body tubes with this. Okay, the rest of it is shown here on OpenRocket. So let me come to a plan view here. So here's our nose cone, a BT-50 tube transition, BT-60 tube. That's got a coupler. It also has a Semrock ejection baffle in there. And then to another BT-60 tube. The fins look like this. They're actually very narrow, but since the rocket is so long and the 3D printed parts are fairly heavy, this still keeps my center of pressure well back. And then the very back piece, this is from another Rocketarium kit that I scavenged for parts. But this is a cluster mount, so this will have a cluster of two 18mm motors in it. All right, to take a look at how this is going to fly, I'm going to go ahead and rerun all these. Okay, but I just give it some examples here, some B4, B6, a C5, a C6, and a D12 or a D16. All of those are 18mm motors, and those are going to give me apogees between about 77 and almost 300 meters. Okay, so this will be an all-around flyer. It's not meant to make any huge speed or altitude records. It's meant to take off kind of slowly and have an impressive flight. So I'm going to go from here now, and when I come back, we'll be in the workshop. I've moved over to my lab and workshop here, and I've got most of the stuff on the table now. So this is the motor mount cluster 3D printed assembly here. And this was from a Rocketarium kit. The other two 3D printed stuff I got off of Thingiverse. And so this is a BT-50 to BT-60 transition. It has holes for screw eyes in both ends. We'll only use the aft end here. And this goes onto this BT-60 tube and then also onto this BT-50 tube. And you can tell both of these have come from other rockets. All right. My BT-50 tube here is 16.4 centimeters. This will be the upper tube, and I may have to trim this just a little bit. Kind of got rough edges there. We'll probably trim it to about 22 centimeters there. And then this one is an uncut piece from another kit. And if I remember right, it comes out right about 13 inches, 12 and a half inches. Or that would be in the neighborhood of about 33 centimeters. All right, a coupler to go between the two BT-60s. This is a kit put out by Semrock for a BT-60 ejection baffle, and we'll go through that. Okay, 3D printed nose cone. This is also from Thingiverse, but it has the canopy on it so that we can assume there's a pilot in there. All right, and then we've got the fins here, and if I put these down, the squares on my mat are 1/2 inch, so you can get an idea if you want to cut fins exactly like mine. Just by looking at that, you can figure out how big they are. Alright, and then my motor mount tubes, these were starting to be assembled probably for the same rocket that the cluster mount came from. And they've already got the engine blocks down inside there. And so I need to put the clips in. These are standard Estes 18mm motor clips. And what I'm going to do is just kind of probe along this until I can break through. So just right there. Maybe a little bit higher. Okay, and then I'm just going to cut that slot there that's just big enough for my motor mount retainer to go in. Okay, and that does seat itself right next to the engine block. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just kind of probing along till I find a soft spot, and that should be right under the ring. It's not quite there. There we go. Okay, you just need to cut about a 3mm slot there. Now, if you're making your motor mounts from scratch, they don't have to be this long. 7 centimeters is fine. For whatever reason, Rocketarium tends to make their engine mounts a little bit longer. Now on this, it's got 2 slots built into it for the engine clips to go, so I'm just going to dry fit these. Alright, you have to kind of bump them around this. Now if you want a cluster mount but you don't have this plastic piece, you can simply extend the body tube by 2 inches or 5 centimeters, and then just get a, either make your own or get a cluster mount kit for a BT60. Okay, so that's going to go to there. Alright, and that gives us just enough clearance. And then the other one will also go in. And again, it's kind of tight in there. You may have to wiggle things around a little bit. Maybe not that much of a wiggle. There we go. Okay, so both of those, when this is done, will mount flush. And I probably won't paint this just because it's a nice red already. But I won't attach this until after I've painted this body tube, because that whole thing will then slide in like this and can be glued in. Alright, now that I know those fit, I'm going to go ahead and glue them in. And this has got a series of ridges printed into it that are specifically there so you can use wood glue as your glue medium here. If you don't want to do that, I would recommend the gel type cyanoacrylate glues, crazy glues, things like that, and that's what I'm going to use on mine. Okay, but I'm going to put a fairly healthy bead in here so that I can take advantage of those ridges. I'll put some up here on the forward end as well. You can be pretty generous with this, because you really don't want your motor mounts come flying through the rocket. Okay, if you're using a cluster kit just in the BD60 body tube, just follow the directions on that. They're usually pretty straightforward. Okay, and now I'm going to come back here once again, slide this in. Alright, you can see I've got a lot of excess there. That's okay, we can wipe that in a little bit. Alright, all the way to there, and then I'm going to take the tissue here and wipe off that excess glue. I'm actually going to kind of wipe it into this a little bit, try not to glue my fingers to it. This just reinforces the tube a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with my other motor mount tube here. give it a little wiggle to get in there, and also push it till it is flush. Okay, and once again, preferably without gluing your fingers to the tubes, just wipe off that excess glue there, and you can use it as reinforcement for your tubes. Okay, that I can now set aside to finish drying on its own. For the next part, I'm going to assemble the very top of this, and so that'll include my BT50 body tube, my nose cone, and my transition here. Now the transition is just slightly loose in there, not quite as tight as I would like. Nose cone's pretty good there. But to make up for that little bit of looseness there, I'm going to use epoxy on the transition. This is just 5-minute epoxy here. You could also use the gel type super glue once more, as it's really good for dissimilar surfaces. The runny kind doesn't work too well if cardboard's involved. Okay, so I'm just going to put a nice healthy bead there, and I'm going to go ahead and mount that on. Just give it a twist to seat it, and we'll put that upward. For the nose cone, if you want to make this a little bit of a payload section, you can, and in that case just use the nose cone with some masking tape on it. For mine, I'm just going to seal the whole thing up here. I have enough payloaders. So I'm going to go ahead and use my epoxy here. Again, if you want to use the gel type super glue, that will work as well. Okay, so now we'll put this on, like that. Okay, give it a little turn to seat it, and I'm going to take this whole assembly now and let it dry upright. Here I'm working on the upper BT60 body tube, and this is kind of rough cut on both sides, so I'm using this Estes tube cutting guide, which is very handy. And I'm just going to trim off about 4 millimeters or so from each end. Now this was painted black previously, and my intention is to just give it an overcoat of some fresh black paint so I don't have to worry about anything bleeding through it. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing on the other end. Okay, and we'll just cut off, again, that little bit of raggedness here, make it a little bit smoother transition. Okay, so that one's ready. I am going to paint this off camera before I attach it to the rest of the rocket. Because the bottom part of the rocket I am planning on painting silver or a very light gray. Here I'm going to assemble this ejection baffle kit. And I've already knocked out the middle here. Now I'm just going to take and pop out all these other little bits. Okay, and then we take this part here, and this is going to fold along these lines. So you can start by just going and creasing them a little bit. Eventually this is all going to come together like that. Okay, so I'm going to dry fit this if I can do it without just disrupting everything. So all the little tabs go into the little slots here on both ends. All right, and that's going to come together. Now this may be one of those things that's easier said than done, as it really wants to spring apart again. Okay, and then this is going to go on the top to accept those little tabs. Okay, so when it's all together, the idea here is that this will go in, looks like this goes in toward the aft. It probably doesn't make any difference. So ejection gases end up coming up here. Burning material like little bits of black powder and such impact around this. And then the gases, after cooling from being baffled around, go through the sides here and up through the middle. Actually, come to think of it, this one goes on top, because this little hole here is for Kevlar shock cord. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and glue this in using a little bit of wood glue. So I'm just going to put a little dab over each hole like this. You'll definitely want to have a protective surface here over your work area. You're probably going to drip glue all over the place. Alright, I'm going to run some glue along this, just like that. Okay, we'll put this down. And if I let that go, it's not going to stay in position for very long. So here I'm going to do the top plate as well. Don't need to worry about that Kevlar hole quite yet. Okay, I'm making a thorough mess on my finger. I'm going to go ahead and put this plate into position. So I'm going to bring that back together. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kind of smear that all around. I'll do the same down here. It's kind of pre-smeared already. I'm just going to let this dry on its side. Now for that seam there, I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape. Just join that together. And even if the masking tape gets glued on there, it's not going to hurt anything. You get back in there. Yeah. See, now everybody wants to come apart again. Okay, I'm going to take this off camera and set it on some wax paper where it can dry without coming apart. While the glue is drying on various other parts of the rocket, I'm going to turn my attention to the fins here. And if you want, you can round the leading edge. I actually want some drag on these things because they are so small, and that will help move that center of pressure back. And so I do want them to be smooth though. And so I'm going to use some polyurethane-based sanding sealer. I get mine from Minwax and then I transfer it into small jars for safer keeping. And then the rocket stand here isn't that important. What is the corrugation in the cross section here. We'll use this to hang our fins. So what I'm going to do here is just take a long pin and I'm going to stick that into my root edge. Okay, these are dissection pins, but dressmaker's pins work well as well. And then I'm just going to use a cotton swab here to paint this on. And what this will do is fill in the wood grain so that the low spots are filled in. The high spots get a little bit filled on, but they'll be easy to sand off. And after a couple of coats of this will give us a really smooth fin. Try to avoid putting this on the root edge. If you do, you can still sand it off. But we want the root edge to be porous so that it sticks to the glue well. Now if you're going to airfoil or otherwise round your fins, go ahead and do that before you put the sanding sealer on. You can shape the fins afterward and either just ignore the sanding sealer on the edge, or you can reapply it. Some people like lots and lots of coats of this, trying to get it as absolutely smooth as possible. I usually give up after about 2 coats because the primer I use also has filling capabilities. Alright, and this takes about an hour to 2 to dry. Okay, so once I've got it all coated, then I take that pin part and I just slide it into a corrugation, and this allows me to hang my fin without it sticking to stuff. All right, do be sure that you've got paper towels down or some other protection because you will drip like I did there, and this is really hard to get off of surfaces once it has dried. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other 3 fins off camera and then come back. My ejection baffle has been glued, and now we can apply the Kevlar shock cord. Now the kit comes with a short Kevlar shock cord that's meant to be tied into either a rubber shock cord or a longer piece of Kevlar. I've gone ahead and just cut myself about 3 meters worth of 100-pound test Kevlar, which should be more than enough for this rocket. So here I'm just going to take a little bit of regular super glue, just put that right on the end here. And I'm just going to take a tissue and wipe off the excess, just like that. You really don't even have to wait for it to dry or use super glue accelerator or anything. And then we can just cut off the frayed bit here. And now it'll go in nice and easy. And I'm going to leave myself a little extra here, and I'm just going to tie a simple loop so that when I tighten that down, the knot doesn't need to hold a whole lot there, because now I'm going to take some more glue and I'm going to embed my Kevlar line here in the glue. Now this is still wood glue, it's just a white one. It was just closer at hand. Alright, and I'm just going to smooth that all the way around. Like that. And if you got excess, you can just smear it all over the cardboard there, kind of reinforce it a little bit. Okay, now my free end here is just trying to pop up, and if it does, it's fine. You don't really need to glue it down as long as that knot that we put here is well glued. And so once again, I'm going to set this aside to dry. The glue on the ejection baffle has dried enough, And so we're going to put it into the forward section of the main body tube here. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my coupler, and we're going to find the midway point on that. So that's about 7.6, which will make the midpoint 3.8. There. Okay. And I'm going to use the coupler to help push the baffle down inside there. Okay, so I think we'll use this side here. So I'm just going to dry fit this first to make sure it goes in. Okay, and then I'm going to take all of the shock cord here. I'm going to pass it through the coupler. Okay, so that'll go in this way. Now I'm not going to push it down yet, but what I want to know now is how far this distance is. So between that mark and the aft edge of the coupler, I've got about 7.3 centimeters, which means I want to glue just a little bit short of that. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is just open my glue up. Okay, and on my ruler, I'm going to measure to about 7 centimeters there, and just use my thumbnail there as a length guide. Okay, some glue on there. Be pretty healthy with that. Alright, I'm going to stick that in, and when I reach my thumbnail, I'll just make a nice bead of glue around there. Okay, looks like I probably could use a little bit more. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to place this back in. So I get all the baffles over the body tube now. And then I'm going to push this in until I reach my mark. And I'm going to take that right back out again to make sure I don't glue it to myself. Okay, as we don't want this glued in quite yet. Alright, but that leaves our ejection baffle right there. Now when we're ready to put the rest of this together, I will add some fillets along there when I'm ready to put the coupler in. And that'll give us a really strong bond then. And this also, once this is fully in place, that coupler is going to help hold the baffle in place against the pressure of the ejection charge here. Now the more I think about it, I really can't come up with a reason not to just do this now. So I'm going to go ahead here, take some more glue, and just put this right around. I don't think we can quite get the camera on it there. Right now I'm just running fillets around here, and I'm taking care not to glue the shock cord. Okay. Now I don't want too much glue in here or it's going to grab. But now I'm just going to take my coupler once more. Okay, and we're just going to push that in until it seats up against. So I have to raise this up a little bit. Okay, but there you can see just inside there where it's seating right up against the baffle, and that's going to provide a really strong joint. All right, and I'm going to set this aside to fully dry. While the glue is still drying on the forward end, we can put the aft end here on this fin marking guide that Estes makes. And this just gives us an easy way to mark where the fins are going to be. So we just find the appropriate markings here for 4 fins in our case. And just make a little tick mark at each one. Okay. And now I'm going to extend those lines up about halfway up the rocket here. Now if you don't have this handy dandy fin marking guide or body tube marking guide that Estes makes, you can just use a door frame or a drawer edge. Okay, so I'm just going to take these about halfway up. It doesn't need to be exact. And then I'm just going to choose a point at random here. I'm about halfway between two of the fin lines. And I'm going to extend that the entire length of the tube. And that will be my launch lug guide. Next, what I'm going to do is just use a fin here as a guide. Okay, just to see about how much we need. And then I'm just going to take some sandpaper here, and I'm just going to run kind of a scratch along each of my fin lines here. And this will just make a better surface for the glue to adhere. Alright, and then for my launch lug line, I'm going to have launch lugs at the base and at the tip. So I'll just give those a couple of scratches as well. My fins have had 2 coats of sanding sealer and then have been sanded with 150 grit sandpaper, and they are ready to be added on. So here you can use white glue or wood glue, or white wood glue. Okay, and here I'm just going to put a fairly thin bead of glue on here. This is a case where more is not necessarily better. Okay, and then I'm going to briefly touch this to my line. I'm going to pull this back off, and I'm going to allow this to get tacky for about 30 seconds and then come back and put the fin on. About 30 seconds have passed, and so now my glue is a little tackier, and this will allow it to hold better. Okay, so I'll just put that back on, and notice it doesn't fall over when I let go. So that's the whole purpose here. Now I'm going to sight down the rocket, make sure my fin is perpendicular and straight. Okay, I'm going to let that dry for about 10 to 15 minutes before I go on to the next fin. Now I'll do the other 3 fins in the same manner, but I'll do those off camera. The glue on my fins is dry. We've come out pretty symmetrical here. And so next I'm going to put on the launch lugs. I'm using 3/16 inch diameter launch lugs so I can use a little bit heavier rod with this. And like the fins, we're just going to put in a even bead of glue here along the length. Now these are so light that you really don't need to wait to let them get tacky, but the same way with the fins, this actually works better if we have a small amount of glue, and then we'll reinforce it later with fillets. Okay, so my aft one there, I'm going to line up with the line, which it isn't. Okay, I'm just kind of sight down the rocket. Almost there. Okay, and when you've got that one in, then go ahead and put the forward launch lug on in the same fashion here. put that just a little bit below where the coupler is here, so we don't accidentally overshoot and have problems coupling the larger or the upper body tube. Now I'm going to sight down both launch lugs and the line and the rocket to make sure everything is aligned. That looks pretty good there. So once again, I'll let this dry and we'll come back when we're ready to do the fillets. The glue on the launch lugs is now dry enough that we can handle it. I'm going to get some tissues ready here because next we're putting on the fillets. And if you heat the rocket horizontal, you can do all of these at once. Okay, so we're just going to run a bead of glue along each fin here. And I like to do facing fins at the same time, but you can do whatever you want here. Alright, so just slide that on and then take a finger and smooth it in. Wipe off the excess and go on to the next one. Okay, and then we'll continue this for the rest of the fins here, and then we'll do the launch lugs last. Now if you want really built up fillets here, it's best to either do it in layers or first do a primary layer like I'm doing here in glue, and then if you really want to build things up faster, you can use wood filler or contour putty like this stuff here. I am not planning on really building this up a whole lot. But if you try and do it with glue all at once with one big heavy fillet, almost invariably that fillet's going to move or create blobs or have big air bubbles in it. Now also, something that tends to happen is that even with small fillets like this, we may get little bubbles that form. And you can either fillet those in with more glue, or that's where I tend to use that contour putty, just for filling in fillet bubbles. And they often really won't show up unless you're looking really closely until after you've primed it. In fact, that's one of the things that I depend upon my priming for, is to show me if I've got some imperfections or other problems before I put on the final coat of paint. Okay, and now we'll do the same thing here with our launch lugs. Now you can also erase the excess line here in between. I usually just leave it alone and paint over it. It's a matter of personal preference. Okay, that one needs a little more glue. Probably not with that much glue. Alright, now I'm going to prop this up a little bit so it's nice and horizontal, and then we'll just let these dry for a while. My fillets are dry, and I'm just taking a close look at them here to see whether or not we've got any bubbles or other bad spots. The fin fillets look pretty good. Now on the launch lug fillets here, I've got some little gaps and bubbles, and the same thing here. So I'm going to fix these using contour putty. And this stuff dries pretty quickly, so you have to work fast with it. Unfortunately, it still takes an hour or two to fully cure. But we'll just run this on like we would a glue fillet. And then just use a finger to smooth it in. Okay, and then we can let that dry and sand it. But it usually does a pretty good job of filling in little bubbles and such. And if you want more built-up fillets, this is one of the things you can use to do that. Okay, and this is mainly aesthetic. Structurally, the bubbles in the fillets aren't going to really hurt anything. But if you want smooth-looking fillets, this is a good way to do it. So I'm going to let this dry and then sand it off camera. The paint on the upper part of the rocket is done, and so now I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to insert a screw eye into the hole here and screw that in. Okay, I would prefer that to be a little bit tighter, but we can deal with that. And so to anchor that in, I'm going to use some of the gel type cyanoacrylate glue here, crazy glue, super glue, whatever your preference is to call it. I'm going to squirt some of that down in there. You can also use epoxy to do this. All right, I'm going to screw that in again. Okay, and just till I can't see the threads anymore. So we leave just a little bit of the shank out like that. And I'll set that aside to dry some more. Here my rocket is in various stages of paintedness here. So the upper section we had glued in the screw eye, and the paint had already been done. So I'm just going to set it aside for now. The upper body tube here has also been painted, and it's ready to be attached once we have everything else done. All right, the main body here has been primed several layers, and it just needs a little bit of touch-up sanding, and then we'll start on the silver coat for this. The paint is finished on the main body section here. When I took the masking tape off, though, I did get a little bit of layer removal here on the coupler, but that shouldn't be a problem. And so we need to attach to both ends of the rocket the remaining pieces. So up at the forward end, we're going to put on the black section here, and then on the aft end we need to add our motor mount. So I'm going to do this as a dry fit first of all, and make sure that it fits properly. Alright, and it is going to cause a little bit of scraping of the paint, so we want to move it as little as possible. Okay, so right about there. Now this is meant to go in with wood glue or white glue. That's why they've got all these indentations here going around this, so the glue can get inside there and hold. So we will do that. I don't know why I keep saying we. I guess you're with me here. Alright, so I'm going to put a bead of glue inside here, but not right at the edge. So I want to have a little bit of wiggle room here. Alright, so just like that, pretty heavy. Okay, now I need to reorient this. I'm making it so my launch lug from this view is on the bottom, or underside there. Okay, and we're going to line that up once more. Try to get that centered. Okay, and then we're just going to push that in. Okay, and that can be allowed to dry there. Now if you want to paint this, you can. I'm not going to. I'm fine with the red there. Alright, and then up at the other end, my shock cord has fallen out here, but I'm going to stuff it back down inside so it doesn't get glued. So for now I'm just going to wind it up around my fingers. And stuff that down inside. Add a couple of tissues here just to keep that out of the way. Now, especially because I did get this peeling here, which makes this really fuzzy, I'm a little bit concerned that we'll have some swelling when I put the glue on. So I'm going to first of all dry fit this. That'll take off some of the fuzz, I think. Alright. Try both sides here, make sure there's not a better fit on one than the other. It's going to be about the same. Alright, so here again I'm going to add some glue. Again here I'm not going to do it right at the edge, I'm going to give it about a centimeter inside. And this just allows me to reposition a little bit before the glue grabs. Now on this there's no particular orientation, so we'll just stick that on there. Run it all the way down. Okay, just move it back and forth a few times to seat the glue. Now that the glue has dried inside, I've pulled the shock cord back out again here. And we're going to attach this to the eyelet on the upper part of the rocket. And just tie this on with a double knot. Now try and keep the free end a little bit short so it doesn't end up getting caught between the shoulder of the reducer here and the body tube. And to help lock that in place, we can just add a little tiny drop of super glue to the knot. Just like that. I'm going to add some up here so I can cut this back more readily. Just wipe off the excess quickly and then just cut that back. Okay, so now it's not long enough that it can get up beside the shoulder there. For a parachute, I'm going to use one I salvaged from an Estes green eggs that catoed on the pad. This is an 18-inch parachute that I've already got set up with a snap swivel here. I may end up moving this to a 15-inch, kind of depending on how windy the day is going to be. But since it does have a snap swivel already installed, it's an easy thing to change that out. Here's the parachute itself, still kind of covered with talcum powder. Okay, so to prep this for launch, you would simply need to pack the parachute and the shock cord. Recall this has a baffle in it, so you don't need recovery wadding. And the baffles tend to work very well. I really haven't had any failures with them. Okay, so I'm just going to fold my parachute roughly into a triangle here. And then take my shroud lines at about a halfway point, draw those up, and just fold the edges over, fold that down once and twice, and then kind of form it into a cylinder here. Alright, my shock cord I just loosely stuffed down inside. I'm just gathering up loosely the shock cord. Alright, and we'll just stuff that down in there. Alright, refold the parachute a little bit here.
Stuff it in there as well. Okay, then that shock cord just wants to keep bouncing out of there. Alright, now make sure we don't get shock cord or snap swivel caught. Right, put that in. It's a little bit loose. I'm going to add a little bit of masking tape to it. Although on launch day we may need to change that again, so it kind of depends on temperature and humidity. Okay, a little bit more. Now, as far as decals go, I will put some on here, but I really haven't decided quite what I want to do yet. Dusty there. Okay, but this is my Boldly Go. Alright, starting up here at the tip, and then coming back to our engine mount. Alright. We've used parts from at least 3 different kits as well as some custom manufactured stuff. So this truly is a frankenrocket, or if you do it from scratch, it's a self-designed rocket. Hope you had fun building this with me, or something of your own in a similar vein. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.